Welcome to PharmaSource.
Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today I'm joined by Jill Robbins, who's a strategic procurement thought leader and serial entrepreneur. Jill's worked at a senior level in leading pharma procurement teams, having worked at companies such as Eli Lilly, Elanco, and her own business, Matchbook, provides outsourced procurement to Biotechs, helping them to get started and building frameworks for them. So I'm really pleased to have Jill here with us today. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you. Great to be here. I appreciate it, Luke.
Of course. Well, to get us started then, maybe you could tell us a bit about your experience of procurement within pharma, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have worked in pharma procurement for now over 20 years.
Wow.
So time truly does fly. The unique thing I would say about, working in pharma procurement, I've worked in consumer packaged goods. I've worked in, direct healthcare procurement as well. And, pharma is complex, it's regulated, much like other industries, but it's unique because you are manufacturing drugs and putting them in people's bodies, right? So safety is of, great concern, quality, speed, value, all of those things. The evolution I have seen in my tenure in working with procurement is really the focus on data. The data has always been there, but it was never truly governed. And I think, had team reporting to me all over the world. So I've transformed team. So animal health, I was responsible for building the indirect procurement team. And, the takeaway I have in the common thread is getting the data right, so that does not become a burden for your team, so they can really focus on the strategic activities, partnering with the business, understanding the importance, what innovations are available in the marketplace are really critical. And then your team can have fun with what they do and not be bogged down with the administrative.
So what kind of supplier data, what type of metrics do you find to be the most helpful in managing that tail of spend?
Yeah. So, I think tying it to business results, procurement is really a key value creator. So often people get lost in focusing only on the bottom line, where procurement, working with marketing, you can really have a top line impact on sales and innovation. And how the business operates, just the overall operational efficiency. So I think understanding what's important to your particular company and tying the procurement metrics to that, the savings can sometimes get lost in the shuffle, and then finance can, agree or not agree, or then they get added back to budget or they get taken away from budget. So I don't always think that that's the best metric. However, that supplier innovation, that top line growth, how are you getting product to market faster? How are you moving things through the supply chain faster? All of those items, I'd say, are of great magnitude and importance.
What advice do you have on those sort of internal stakeholder relationships? Because I imagine that business partnering with marketing is very different to business partnering with R&D, for example. What are the tried and tested strategies around that?
Yeah, getting to know the business, getting to know your stakeholders. Don't make assumptions. Everyone is there to make a positive impact. So, kind of getting back to the basics, and, understanding what those suppliers do, how long the business has been working with them, understanding what's available in the marketplace, like you mentioned, within marketing, within, IT or information technology, the different areas, so that you can really become a trusted advisor. That's the goal. You want a seat at the table. Everyone talks about the seat at the table, and it's kind of this kind of like pie in the sky, but it doesn't have to be. You should be there, advocate with external parties. You're that independent, trusted voice. The business is working with that supplier day in and day out. So, understanding, what their objectives are, what their metrics are, what their KPIs are, and, helping them deliver on those or over deliver.
So in your career, Jill, you've advanced a lot within companies and creating your own businesses and doing various different things. What advice would you have for anyone listening who's seeking to make a similar impact within their career?
Yeah, think and act like an owner. Even though you work within the business and, you're going to move around, you're going to be responsible for different categories. But think like a P&L owner, and that will really remove some of the blinders that exist and break through some of the silos. Pharma is very siloed historically. I think that's improving, but it continues to be a barrier to innovation and collaboration. And I think when you can see across the value chain, procurement has the best seat in the house. You can see how the business operates, how the business works together, how they're not working together. And you can highlight some of these opportunities to your business partners that they may not see. So my advice for people into, becoming accountable, understand kind of what makes things tick, because what is obvious to you and what you see may not be obvious to everyone else. And
let's talk a bit about how breaking down silos can work between the procurement function and with the suppliers and the sales teams from their side. I know it's one of the things you talk about is how to bridge the gap.
Yep. I'd say, a falsehood that might exist that, hey, the supplier is the bad guy, it's always their fault. It's suppliers. Yes, you're paying them. Yes, they're there to, either deliver, goods or deliver services. You want it to be competitive. You want, especially when you're going through a competitive process. But suppliers see things in businesses, how you can improve, or what are your competitors doing? How are they approaching, this age-old problem, and learn from them? And they
me some counterintuitive facts.
Just kind of building on what we're just talking about, that salespeople are kind of the enemy, that, they're kind of in the US, the analogy is kind of like a used car salesman. And they're always in, they want to do a dog and pony. They're not listening. They don't understand my business. And really, that has to be put in the past. Yes, you want mails and cold calls. So yes, that does exist. But when you've got strategic suppliers in place that, you've worked with for a long time, or you're going, the supplier as the enemy, you only call them when you need them, can be a competitive advantage, because they're working across every pharma company, and they can give you insights on what works well, what doesn't work well. So take the time to ask those questions and allow them to teach you how you can run your business better and more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. So going from the very strategic type of partnerships to the more, how do you find RFPs? Because as someone who's been at the receiving end, a better way of handling that?
Yes, so savings. I think that too many people in procurement, should I save on this event or this RFP? And it's got to be there is a better metric, and it has to be value. So it may cost more, but if you are delivering things faster, you don't have disruption in your service or disruption in your supply, that is worth the cost in gold, in my view, right? So, I think people need to think differently, and the RFP process has become far too tactical. And I always encouraged my teams, and in talking with suppliers, and even, in my consulting, on the sales side, I coach my clients who are selling to procurement, be innovative about how you respond. include a video about what differentiates your clients that may just be outside the box. That will make you stand out from your competition if you just check the box and submit it. And same with procurement. When you're releasing an RFP, ask the supplier to be creative in their response. Yeah, cover the usual bases. But a lot of the information that is asked in an RFP can be found, in public domain. Waste your time just because you've got to go through all of these hordes of paper or, PDF files or whatever it is, but understand how you're evaluating, determine that evaluation criteria, be very clear about that before you even release the darn thing. Because too many times I've seen teams, they'll release an RFP and they don't even understand what's important to them and what they're asking for, and then how that's going to contribute, to the business success when it comes back. So be more strategic, be more creative about the process, so that you then open the door to be collaborative with the supplier that is ultimately selected.
Mm-hmm. So in your experience, are there any particular software tools or technology approaches which helps to manage this whole process better when it comes to supplier relationship management?
When it comes to SRM, I mean, it's a slippery slope. So everyone kind of defines it differently. And for me, you have to start with the data. So is the supplier complying to the contractual terms? Are they invoicing to the contract? Are they delivering to, the KPIs or SLAs that are defined? So once you have that quantitative data in place and it can be measured, then you get into the qualitative. So how are they being innovative? How are they thinking about, approaching, the same good or service differently to deliver better? So those things I think are equally important. And then, like I mentioned before, but that, equal exchange of ideas has to be, done on a regular basis. And, there are suites of tools. There are, a few that are just focused on kind of SRM, but you have to tie everything together and there has to be a common denominator. The one thing I will say, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, but, a lot of these suppliers have subsidiaries or have holding companies, but connecting all of the pieces together so you can see, the entire relationship under one umbrella, and then getting into, that quantitative and that qualitative information in, high level scorecards. So there can be overkill and then there can be, chaos where nothing is connected. So I think you have to find what works for your organization. I'm of the view that simpler is better. You want to see kind of a high level roll up, whether it's, green, yellow, red on a variety of metrics, and then, also insights on how they're performing with others. So, I think that's the next level. Everyone's talking about, artificial intelligence and, is this going to, threaten, privacy, and how is this going to, threaten security potentially? But, we live in a world where you can see reviews of restaurants, you can see reviews of every service provider out there in your area. And I think that's the next level, is getting some insight into performance within your organization, as well as how they're performing, within those goods and services at other organizations.
Yep.
Because that's what's going to drive accountability at the end of the day, in my view.
When you're advising a biotech startup, so maybe they don't have any infrastructure at all when it comes to procurement technology, is there a best practice technology stack which you'd advise them on if they're just starting up?
Of course, that is a great question, but it always depends on what their end game is. Most biotechs, they want to grow, and then ultimately they're going to be acquired at some point. And then you spend all of this time, energy, and effort on an implementation and, all of this software that ultimately just gets thrown aside. So I think there has to be a balance, again, depending on the company, yes, you do need some structure in place, but I think, again, simpler can be better, and having the discipline around the data, so that, the contract storage you need, legals doing contracts, procurement's doing contracts. So I think that can be really key. And then how you're tracking those contracts to the payments. And, if there's a full ERP system, or if it's, like a NetSuite, whatever's being used, some people, early startups in biotech are using bill.com. So, how do you connect all of those pieces? And there's still an element of supply chain, right, in clinical development that you need in place. So you need to be able to track things. So it's not a one size fits all. It kind of depends on, what the long-term game is.
And finally, I know that you do a lot of mentoring, particularly for women in what can be a fairly male-dominated industry. I just wondered what advice you have when you're speaking to young women about their career.
Yeah, no, great question. So, be yourself, don't be anyone else, especially, if you want to have a family and, everyone has different priorities. If you want to be CPO, you're going to have a different level of dedication than if you want to remain an individual contributor. So kind of, you want to take the leadership route versus, being, a contributor. And there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. Everyone has to decide that for themselves. But, I think the same advice that I shared for career advancement, understand the business, that basic business acumen, understanding kind of what makes different areas tick, how to connect some of these fragmented pieces, and, thinking and acting like an owner. If you have a side hustle, if you don't have a side hustle, but understanding how businesses operate will really make a difference when you are in a large enterprise, because it gives you a different lens and appreciation on when things work well and are efficient, and when things aren't working well and when they're inefficient. And then you can have a voice and, speak intelligently, and again, speak with data.
Great.
Yeah.
Jill, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You've been listening to the PharmaSource podcast.
I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you found it interesting, you'll be pleased to hear that Jill will be doing an exclusive workshop for PharmaSource members on the 28th of June. It's all about bridging the gap between sales and procurement and sharing strategies for how to create better supplier relationships. We're limiting seats so it can be a really interactive and valuable session. So head over to pharmasource.global/events and register today.